So what we're looking at, and many of you have probably already seen this video, was LAPD who shot a man that was wielding a machete. And so one of the things that we don't see in this video is this man actually went to an auto parts store and robbed it probably a few minutes before we actually see this video that takes place. One of the things I want to highlight specifically with this video is, again, like I've always gotten the question before, is how come officers shoot to kill instead of shooting to wound? Now, I want you guys to understand something. Like I said before, we don't shoot to kill, we shoot to stop threats. But the other things I want you to understand from this video is that these officers had so many different other elements that they also had to consider. You'll also see the subject in this video. He goes to the Chick-fil-A drive-thru and carjacks somebody for their vehicle. Now, the officers had him surrounded at this point, but you also got to realize is that they have a backdrop, and what that backdrop is, it's a restaurant, which is probably full of people. So if they end up trying to shoot this guy at that point in time, again, like I said before, they'll be accountable for every bullet that misses his subject. Then when the subject takes away in the car that he steals, he obviously gets surrounded by the police officers as we've seen, and then he flees from the vehicle. Now, when he flees from the vehicle, now we have an armed subject who's just committed a violent crime, a robbery with a deadly weapon, and he's actually shown no remorse for any type of care for human life at this point. So my question for you is, at what point in time would you, as the officers in this video, take use of some type of deadly force or use of force in general? Now, the reason I ask that question is because many people have questioned before of when officers use force, why officers use force, how officers use force. But one thing is specific here is you got to realize that they're trying to detain a subject who has been utilizing a deadly weapon and trying to take this guy into custody. Now, he starts to run at the officer, and so the officer starts to run, and as he's running, he's shooting. Well, obviously, that's a terrible situation to be in, and the officer does the best as he can to try to, utilize his gun to try to stop the subject, but the guy continues to run. And so that goes to the question of how come we don't shoot people in the arms or the legs? Well, if you're that officer, how difficult do you think it might be to shoot this guy in his arms or his leg as he's running? Very difficult. So as a guy enters into the street, some of the other factors that you don't realize is that now we have to worry about oncoming traffic. They're in the middle of the street, and as they're trying to take this guy into custody or stop the threat, now they have to worry about innocent bystanders that might just be driving by and not realizing what's going on. Now, the subject at the very end of the video starts to raise the machete, and it looks like he's going to try to harm the officer that's on the ground. And luckily, his partners were there, and they end up shooting this guy, and they end up mortally killing him. The one thing I want you guys to understand is, like, again, this job is difficult. This job, there's a lot of things that people don't understand why we do, but specifically speaking to why we don't shoot to wound people is because the biggest part of a person's body is their torso. And so we're shooting to stop the threat. If we shoot and that person goes down and he's no longer a threat, then we're going to stop shooting. But we're not going to try to shoot somebody in the hand or the arm or the finger, whatever it may be, to try to wound them, because that's not necessarily going to stop the threat. I've shown recent videos, the video in Columbus, Ohio, of officers shooting people that are still moving despite being shot. And so that's why I always say we will shoot the biggest part of a person's body, which is usually the torso, because we know at that point in time that's our biggest target, and we want to make sure that everybody that's around the situation is safe. And so I want to make sure that my odds are high of striking the subject as opposed to missing and fatally wounding somebody else. So that's my take on this one. I hope it makes a little bit of sense. And if you have any questions, just hit me up.